So just let me know. We're good? Okay. So this is Cristina Rodriguez. Today is April 4th, 2019, and I'm sitting here with Mrs. Vivian Filer in Pugh Hall in the reading room for the Bob Graham Center. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Welcome.
Can you please state your full name for me?
The really full name is Vivian Lee Washington Filer.
Okay, and can you spell Lee for me? I know there's
L-E-E, that
okay.
Lee,
Perfect. So when and where were you born?
Actually, I was born in Trenton, Florida. It's about 38 miles west of here. But my family moved here when I was about 7 years old. So I spent all of my life here, basically.
Okay. So you would say that you grew up in Gainesville?
Absolutely.
Not Trenton?
That's right.
Okay. So did you grow up with any sort of siblings?
Yeah, I'm one of 5 sisters, one of 5 girls my parents had. So I have 4 siblings.
Would you like to tell me their names?
Yes,
their ages?
my oldest sister is Effie, and she's passed away. She would be 83 now, okay. 83. And my sister Sarah is, Sarah Brown. Sarah is 76. And Karen Johnson is 10 years younger than Sarah, so she's 66. And then Cynthia is 2 years younger than Kade, so she's 64. Now, if this ever gets published, I'm in trouble.
Because you're telling all their names, all their ages.
Ages, okay.
So you were the second oldest.
Second oldest.
So did you have sort of any sort of responsibilities for your younger sisters?
I did, and all that I didn't have, I took. My older sister was very laid back and very quiet, and I was never any of that. So I became self-appointed leader, but when my mother and my father worked, my older sister and I were responsible for the younger ones and that's one of my younger sisters, I'm 16 years older, and the other, I'm 14 years older. So they were really like our little babies. And then the one that's 4 years younger than I am, she's never stopped being the baby because she was the baby for 10 years. So to this very day, she still is.
She's still
but it was a lot of fun. I remember taking them to the parades, but I'd gather up the nieces and nephews too, because all the parents were working, and we'd walk to University Avenue and then get a drink and go home. But that's what they remember now.
Oh, that's so nice. So what kind of parades?
The University of Florida. The University of Florida homecoming parade. And at that time, Lincoln High School had huge parades. And if I wasn't in the parade, I would take care of them. But I marched in a group with the Lincoln, we were the drill team. So I marched in that for a while.
So you did like all sorts of synchronized dances and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. In our way.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. I've heard really great things about Lincoln High School.
Oh, yes.
So, do you want to talk about Lincoln at all?
Well, what I really like to say to everyone is that my class, the class of 1956, was the last class out of the building that's now the Aquin Jones building. When that building was our school, the downstairs floor was the elementary school from first grade through 6th grade, because that's the way it was. It was elementary and high school. And then once you were in 7th grade, all of the classes were upstairs. So everybody was really excited about graduating from the 6th grade because then everybody was upstairs. Miss Aquin Jones was my principal the entire time. A remarkable man. I never realized what great man he was. But his wife was as great. And she was my English teacher. Quiet, she never raised her voice, but she could get the guys who were rowdy in her class up to the principal's office without ever raising her voice. And she was so kind. But she was excellent in teaching us. We studied Shakespeare one week and African American prose and poetry another week. So our education was very broad. And that's when I learned how to do the stories that everybody has heard me do for 60 years. And I just give her all the credit for that.
That's amazing, that you remember her so fondly and so vividly.
Oh, yes.
Some people definitely stand out to us like that. So you graduated out of the original building, and
Yes.
then they moved to the other campus.
Yeah, the next class, the class of 1957, went to the new school because then the construction was complete, and they could enroll that class in September and have them graduate. It's September 56 and have them graduate 57.
Okay, so that was the new school that had the federal funding, right? The $1 million that they talked about at the symposium?
Yeah, to build.
Okay. So you already mentioned that you really enjoyed your English class. Were there any other classes or subjects in school that really...
Well, we're singers, my sisters and all of us, so I was always in the chorus. All of us were always in the chorus, so I loved music, but I also loved math, which that later left me, and that love and that skill left me. But I was the competition at that time, I belonged to a little group, self-appointed little group, and our goal was to always be at the top of the list in our class and on achievement. So we were the original National Honor Society for Lincoln High School. The group that I was in. So we were always in competition. So every class had to be important. But I loved it. I loved the English and I loved math, but and the music part too.
Okay,
so.
Cool. So even though your favorite subjects were math, English, and music, what brought you to healthcare then?
Oh, now that's a story all in itself. When we lived actually on Southeast 8th Street, which is where my parents' house is now, and it's not far from the project that I have, the Cotton Club Museum. But there were one nurse who was the first African-American public health nurse in Gainesville, Miss Rosa Lundy. She walked the streets with her little nursing bag because she wanted to visit the mothers who had babies that had been delivered by midwives. And she was making baby check on them. She carried her bag, and oftentimes she had diapers and change of clothes, because sometimes she never knew what she'd find. I thought, oh, I want to do that one day. And then the second African-American public health nurse was Miss Nurse Maxie, Flossie Max. And they ended up not living more than 2 blocks from each other, even though they didn't know each other when it all started out. And they were just up at the top of the line for me, and I thought, that's what I want to do. So as I grew up, I'd get the dogs and cats in the neighborhood and try to make them my patients until they all ran away from me.
Wow. So were they your nurse as well? Did you ever go and see them?
No, I didn't, but I was able to be in situations when they visited other homes and things to see what they did. And I think I was just thrilled by the fact that they had these beautiful blue uniforms on and the little cap and the medical bag in their hands. And I knew that wherever they went, they were going to help somebody. So that was really important to me.
Yeah,
so,
that's incredible. Do you remember any other African American or Black nurses or doctors, like maybe Dr. Banks?
Yes, Dr. C.W. Banks was an excellent physician to begin with, but he was a very caring person because Alachua General Hospital was a general hospital here, and it was very segregated, of course. All of the patients that were Caucasian or any other nationality except African American, they were placed on a floor that corresponded with their illness, like the medical surgical floor, if you were there for that, if you were there for surgery or something medical, and then the children on a pediatric floor, the mother was on a obstetric floor, those things. Yeah. If you're African American, it didn't matter why you were there. All of us were placed on a long hall on the second floor, and in a room as long as it's a longer bed by bed by bed. One side of the hall was women, the other side was men. And so it didn't matter why you were there. So laboring moms and all of that were in the same room. And this was on the second floor, no air conditioning, and the boiler room was under. So I remember the sad situation of my sister that I'm 16 years older than. She came home and Dr. Banks had instructed my mom how to take care of her skin because it was so hot in there. She'd gotten all these little blisters on her face. But he was so kind. he realized the trouble that some people had getting health care. And he was an excellent surgeon, I hear. I've heard doctors profess that. Doctors have said what a great instructor he was and how much they learned just by being in the operating room with them. Yeah. They did that as one of his ceremonies, and I thought that was great. And one other incident with him that I think is remarkable, there was a baby born that needed an incubator, and there was not one there. And Dr. Banks purchased an incubator for that baby and left it there. So he's at the top of the list for me in terms of caring people. I learned a lot from him too. Yeah,
he really seemed like an incredible person.
Yes.
And physician,
yes.
Of course.
Yes.
So doubling back to school, sorry. Once you finished high school, was college always on your mind? Or?
Always on my mind, but not always accessible. I was born and I went through school during segregation, so there was no college here in town. The closest one, Brewster College, was like a training program. It wasn't a college actually for nurses, and that was in Jacksonville. So I became, I was a maid. I started to be a maid at age 14. I worked after school every day and on Saturdays. And then when I graduated and got married, I worked as a nursing assistant. That was my first health care job. And that was at Shands Hospital in pediatric floor, which was the 7th floor at that time. So, well, actually I worked at Taco Charlie. It was Sunland Training Center, now it's Taco Charlie. Yes. And then I became pregnant with my second baby. And at that time, they wouldn't let you work out there. There was something they would mark the baby. It was called some disability or something to the baby. So I had to stop work and delivered my baby. And he was a little premature. So my husband wanted me to stay home until he was a year old. And I've never, ever, ever stayed home a whole year without working. And I tried. I really did try. But by the time he was 6 months old, that's all I could do. So I applied to Shands, and they hired me as a nursing assistant there. Okay. So I worked 10 years nights shifts so that I could be home and do all the things my boys were doing, because I had 2 boys. And then at that time, the dean of the College of Nursing was Dean Dorothy Smith, who is an icon of a nurse in her own right, has written a lot, was very innovative, very forward-thinking in all the things she did. And they often sent nursing students up to the 7th floor, and they took care of babies that we took care of, we being the nursing assistants. And so I had an opportunity to work with them and to show them things that I'd done. And during rounds, they had what's called nursing rounds. They'd bring everybody in, present a case, and sometimes the nursing students would want me in there. So I knew Dr. Smith better than some other people because of that relationship. And then at one nursing rounds, they were presenting a baby and they wanted a song. And so my sisters and I are the Washington sisters. And we sang, I'll never forget that. And they put it in the newspaper, and the song, I don't remember all of it, but it says, he was in traction because he'd been in an accident. We were all standing around the bed, and the sisters were singing, pulleys and ropes around my bed, and I can't move except for just a little bit. I'd really like to split. So that was they recorded that. Cute. So then I became not a friend, but an actual acquaintance. So Dr. Smith, when they integrated the University of Florida, and that was about 1970s, 69, 70s. She said to me that if I wanted to come to college at the University of Florida, that she thought they had some source of scholarship. But in the meantime, Santa Fe College opened here as a community college in 1968. And I was so thrilled because they opened integrated. So I worked nights and took classes during the day and slept sometimes. But at the time I got that message from Dr. Smith, I was 18, I was maybe 9 credit hours short of graduating. And here, this was April, and she was saying I could get in June and September, and I thought, I'm gonna do it. But the Santa Fe College ran summer sessions, A term and B term, and it was quarter system. So you could really punch in a lot, but I had to convince every dean there that if they let me do that, that I could do it. And I did, and I got through and was ready for September to come into the nursing program at the University of Florida.
Oh, so that's great. So you were working as a nursing assistant, and then you were taking classes. So just like sort of prep classes for nursing
for my
school?
AA. No.
For your AA.
You had to have an AA degree to go for a bachelor's degree. So I achieved I graduated from my Associate of Arts from Santa Fe, and that's how I became. But I had to get the prerequisites done too, because I had to take micro and all of those things. And I did it as an independent study because I couldn't find a class in that short period. So here I am looking through, at these things growing and trying to figure them out under the microscope. It was something, but I passed it.
Yeah, that's incredible. You essentially made your own microbiology class for yourself.
All by myself.
Wow. So so nursing assistant, didn't have, you don't need a degree for it, so you were working and then then earned your AA.
Right.
So what was it like coming to UF so soon after it was integrated?
It was not good. Here's where I was. African American, older, working full time and taking care of myself. That's so diabolical to the regular nursing student at University of Florida, who is a step up on all of those things. So in class, it was very difficult to keep up. Along with that was the fact that I didn't have the science classes, all of them, that those students had. So I had to really, really get a lot of tutoring and spend a lot of midnight hours in the library and just studying, just trying to make it. And I had great instructors, though. I really have to say they went overboard to try to help me and to suggest things and to mentor. So I was able to graduate in 1970 with my bachelor's in nursing.
Okay. So when did you start at the school? What year and then what year
I
did you
started
finish?
in 1970, graduated in 1972.
Oh, okay. Wow, so you did it right in 2 years. Do you remember any of the names specifically of some of those professors who really helped you out?
Well, that might come to me before we finish, because they're vivid in my mind, but their names are not there.
That's absolutely fine.
Audrey Herbert, Audrey Gina, OB and GYN. She was one, and there are some others, and 3 of them are still active as adjunct, but I hope I can remember their names. Okay.
Okay, it'll come to you.
Okay.
So once you finished nursing, finished your program in nursing, now you were certified, you were an RN. I was recently at the Kade Museum, and I saw a little video of you talking about Dr. Kade. So when did you end up working with him?
Well, see, I want the story really straight. I did not do all the things that Phoebe Miles thinks I did. I tried to get her straight, but she is so enamored with that story that she said, on the pediatric floor, we had babies that were dehydrated. Not to the degree that they would need intravenous fluid. They could still have fluid by mouth, but the only fluids we had to give them by mouth that were clear liquids considered were Coca-Colas. And giving a child Coca, that was all we had. So what we actually did was to take a little sugar, put it in the Coca-Cola and let it fizz away. That would fizz all the fizz away. And then feed it to the babies. And they endured that until they finished their bout of whatever they had, diarrhea or whatever that was. But when Dr. Kade started working in his group with the formula for what became Gatorade, they also brought up that formula to the floor, to the 7th floor. We didn't know really what it was at the time, but we received it in gallon jugs. And when babies were dehydrated, the doctors would order those babies to have that fluid because it had electrolytes in it. And that's why we were using Coke, because it had some, but very limited. But certainly his formula had all of those. And so the babies were able to rest their gut and survive. So he'd come up late at night and check on them, And he was just always a nice, easy person. He'd just roam around and see what was going on the floor. And so I didn't have a really active association with him. It's just that knowledge.
Okay, I was just wondering because I had seen the little video of you talking about the baby.
Yeah, and so when I met with Phoebe, because she was planning the Kade Museum, and I was planning the museum that I just cut the ribbon on.
The Cotton Club.
So we got together and we're talking about it, and I said, well, you know, when I worked as a nursing assistant, we fed the babies that formula on. She just blew her away because she hadn't heard of that part of her daddy's work. And that's how I haven't done anything big and great with that, but she just did that for me.
But that's still a really cool story that it just happened at a time where you were still working with the babies.
Yeah.
So, sorry, just to backtrack, I just wanted to ask about Dr. Kade because it came to mind. Once you were out of nursing school, you were still working
at the same floor,
at the
pediatric.
same pediatric place, but now you were an RN. So what kind of responsibilities?
Well, first thing I became what we were calling nurse clinician at that time, and my duties were to follow two different groups of doctors. One was the hematology, the doctors that did all of the kids that had blood disorders, and the other was a surgical group. So when they made rounds on the floor, I made rounds going bed to bed with them, and I'd jot down things that they said they wanted different, or I'd encourage, the nurses, and they'd ask me. So that was my duty, and I worked in the clinic when those patients came in to follow them from clinic through the floor and all of that. And so it was a day job, and it was a busy job, and I got to meet a lot of really neat people, but I really didn't like it a lot. I'm a bedside nurse.
Yeah, you were just walking and jotting notes.
So that's right. So then I asked to go back to floor nursing, and I was night nurse, 11 to 7 on the floor. And it was great. I worked with some of the same people that I'd been nursing assistants with, and they were very helpful and it was a whole big camaraderie sort of thing. And I worked there for 2 years on that floor. And one morning, one of the faculty members from Santa Fe's nursing program came over and said she'd heard how good I was in peds, and they needed a pediatric instructor. And would I come teach? I said, oh no, that is not nursing. I am not at the bedside. So 2 days later, the other nurse who had been in the NICU unit there, but now was teaching, Ellen Wamba, she came and had breakfast with me. And Ellen said, well, Vivian, aside from being home with your children, the things that you think are important and near and dear to your heart in the nursing of children, you can teach that. And now that was because I had my own little so I became a teacher of that. If you ever see any of my students, they'll tell you that, yes, I did hold and love the baby, and I sang to the baby, because my thing, at that time, we didn't let parents stay. Yeah. So here I have these babies in the incubators, are all over, and that needed touching and needed caring. They were developing the research on how important that was. But I always tell my students, if you can't take them out, you can put your hand inside and touch them and sing to them. And they said, Vivian, I can't sing. I said, well, the baby won't know. And I won't tell them. I won't tell them. And so that, and that if they cause pain, as in a shot, the last thing they needed to do was hold and love the baby, because that's what the baby's going to remember, the last thing.
Yes.
And so they're all over the place. The Santa Fe graduate, because we put out hundreds, and so I love going in a hospital and saying, "Oh, you were my teacher."
That must be really cool.
It is. It's cool. It's very cool.
What kind of songs would you sing to your babies in the hospital?
John Jacob Jingleheimer Smith, and on top of Old Smoky, it's soothing. On top of Old Smoky, and I sang that a lot with the. Yeah, just whatever. And I didn't care what they sang, as long as they were making a song.
Yeah.
Yeah. When my sisters and I, when my first granddaughter was born, they allowed us into the delivery room, and we sang to her. And she was just a few minutes old.
That must have been very special to have that
It was,
experience,
yeah.
to be able to like sing
Yeah.
for your new granddaughter.
Uh-huh.
I don't really, I'm trying to think of some other stuff I want to ask about. Probably relating still to the nursing. What about the Greater Gainesville Black Nurses Association?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I love talking about that. I wasn't aware that there was such a thing as a National Nursing Association for African Americans, because the American Nurses Association was for white nurses, and they were not letting black nurses in. But there was a Black Nurses Association that was not as involved, not as national, I guess. I guess it might have been a statewide. But women that were interested in sharing and gathering and doing all those things gathered in, I think it was Washington. I don't really know the story that well, but I heard about them having conferences in '84, and my school sent me when I learned about it. My boss was Jerry Green, with a G, and she was just thrilled that there was something that I could go to get CEUs and learn things to bring back. So I started to go to those conferences, and when I went to several of them, I realized that there was another nurse from Gainesville, and I saw her every year. So we got together. Her name was Vancia Bruchet.
Yes.
And so then Vancia and I decided, after we had attended so many years, that we should have a local chapter here in Gainesville. So we were the founders of that chapter. We gathered the nurses together. We did they have all the, guidelines you have to follow in order to be considered a chapter. And then we were given our certificate and all of that at a big conference. And we have this picture with all the black dresses and the things that we did. But our goal was to teach as much as we could about healthy living, and to help and encourage people to learn more about the illnesses they suffered and the way they should be treating them, and how to approach the doctor, and how to make sure they knew what was expected before they left, and how not to walk in the room afraid of the doctor, because we all do that. Oh. And everything goes out of your mind. And so we were trying to teach people how to engage so that they walked away with what they needed. And one of the things we did the first huge health fair. It was, the Gainesville Boys Club was then on Waldo Road. It was a great big open building. And we used that building, and we had tabling all around the side, all the complete side, front, back, of all the services from the university, from the city, from the county. People tabled. And we had vendors there. I can remember, it was just great. We did that for a number of years before it became something that other people were doing, and we scaled back. Now what we do is ask small churches, small cities to invite us in, and we bring what their need is. We try to they said we need this thing, and we try to put that together along with activities and also. And I was president for 10 years. Now I'm president emeritus, and the president is Vancia, and she's excellent. She's excellent.
Yeah, I was actually I was talking to her to try and set up an interview with her as well. Okay. But she also has a crazy schedule.
Yeah, she does.
You know. Yeah. But so your main goal was essentially health literacy in the communities.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. That's a really wonderful
And it was way back,
thing.
so in the 80s. But, and then we were called on a lot to come do small forums, to be on a panel, to do those sort of things. And I've served on many boards. I don't know if you've read that, but I was on the board at Electra General Hospital. Actually on the board when Shands took it over, and they were meeting to discuss services and what, and then with too many. But anyway, I was going through the sorrow and all the horrible feelings it was losing Electra General, because it was the county hospital. So many people were born there. So many people received care there, and it just was. it was a gathering place. So now they have, they had a real big reunion last year and brought a lot of people together. I didn't go, but I heard it was really, really great. But health, and the health of folk. I do, at my church, I chair the healthcare ministry. Right now, I'm coupling with 3 neighborhoods. I call them the triad neighborhoods. They are the black neighborhoods that surround Depot Park. So there's Porter's and Spring Hill and Sugar Hill. Well, we're buddying with a professor here at the University of Florida, the NAACP, and my church to put on a huge health fair in May. And we want to address mental illness, mental health, as our major concern, but also be open to other things and plan other conferences and health fairs out of this one. So.
Okay, so what church is that?
Mount Olive, African Methodist Episcopal.
Okay.
And I have to tell you all that because there are other Mount Olives that are primitive Baptists and all of that.
Oh yeah, no, there's so many. So.
Yes. But I love doing that, and out of my church it has a program. Well, because this person belongs to my church, Dr. Carolyn Tucker, who is a professor in psychology, she has this whole Health Smart program there. And of course, she keeps us on our toes there. And she has now infused that program into the whole district of our church. And they have a lab where they actually practice this and have people involved in Jacksonville. It's a big push there, and I'm on her board for that. I'm on all of her boards, it seems, but I love it that she respects me enough to ask me to do those things, and I love sharing. And I think if I know something that will benefit others, I love to tell that. I love to fix things, probably too much. Sometimes I'm called bossy, but I don't know why they would say that.
It's not bossy, it's assertive.
Okay, I got it.
Wow, that was, you do so much. Okay.
Wow.
So I was wondering about the transition from Alachua General to Shands.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about what happened there, but...
Well, first of all, Shands purchased Alachua General. Parent Alachua General had some structural problems and maybe some financial problems and all. But the idea was that Shands was going to leave Alachua General in where it was, so that it continued to serve the community in the capacity that it did. Because to get into Shands, usually you had to be referred by a physician. And Alachua General opened to the local doctors, and they had a place to practice and to do surgery and all of those things. So we went through this thing, and we, 2 doctors and about 3 of us community workers, 3 years before they closed it, saw the handwriting on the wall. And we started to meet to talk about how to maybe forestall it or cut it out and what we needed to do in terms of organizing. We met. We tried to get the commissioners to meet with them because we thought, boy, they need to be involved in this. We could never set that up. Dr. Black was one of those people, and Dr. Buchanan was one, and I was one. I can't remember the other, but we never really pulled it off in conjunction with the community and the county and the city. So when they were really head over heels in and ready to do it, they started to have meetings, but they were too late then. So a day late and a dollar short, my mom would always say. So they couldn't get it done. But so then what it did was to throw our local doctors into that system. And I'm not too sure how they survived in there, but I think some people may have left, I don't know, because I didn't have a physician at that time that was involved in that transition. But just think about it. All of a sudden, they've gone from seeing their patient at the office, at the hospital, through their operation, and back at their office for post-op, because that was what local healthcare was. And then they went through teaching hospital, which does all of those things well, but has a different paradigm altogether in terms of how you get in and all of that. And now Shands is trying to evolve into a more user-friendly place than it was when they started. So I do think they have developed some new strategies that are more patient-friendly.
Yeah, but definitely initially they were not there for the patients. They were there for the students of University of Florida.
Well, and if you weren't referred, If you weren't referred, you weren't. But I, as a nursing assistant, took care of some things I will never see ever again. I remember the first baby we had that I took care of, they had Marfan's disease. You know what that is? That's the wrong lung.
The connective
yeah,
tissue.
no, because they're so long. And I held this baby, 3-month-old baby, and he's this long because already he's growing. I always tell folk that I'm pretty sure that Abraham Lincoln probably had that. You see how he's
I
gone?
think so too. You see his hands and the knuckles, his joints.
I think he probably had that as well.
Okay, so oh my gosh, there's so many different things I want to ask.
Well, in the middle of all of that, I have to tell you,
Yes.
I mentioned Miss Frederica Jones,
Yes.
my English teacher. At the time we celebrated Black History Week, WRUF radio would give us 15 minutes to have something on air about Black history. And along with whatever they were presenting, my instructor, Miss Jones, let me go on to do one of the poems that I have done since that time until this day. And I turned them into stories. So they actually are poems. So I do stories poetically told.
Yeah.
And so I'm still doing some of the same ones, like Little Brown Baby with the Sparkling Eyes. Come to your pop and sit on his knee. What you been doing, son? Making mud pies? Look at that bib. You's as dirty as me. And look at that mouth. That's molasses, I bet. The bees are going to catch you and eat you up yet, being so sticky and sweet. Goodness land. And it goes on and on. This is a daddy talking to his son. And he goes on, and it's in African American folk language, which is another story all in itself. It's not poor English, it's a folk language. But I do standard English and those pieces. But that became a big part of my life. I at one time covered all the schools in the county doing African American Black History Month. Week now, and the teachers they scheduled me a year in advance, and now I see kids who, when I did that piece, I'd set them on my lap to look in their face, and now they have children. Now they're 40 and 50, 60 years old, and they say, Miss Fowler, I sat on your lap.
So, Mrs. Jones, what school was she a part of, and what year was it?
This was my high school teacher, high school English teacher. She's the wife of Mr. Aquin Jones.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
okay.
yes,
I was not making the connection.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay,
that's right.
okay.
She played piano and she taught English, and she was just great.
Oh, that's so. Do you still perform for elementary schools?
I perform everywhere.
Everywhere?
I just finished down in Tallahassee at the Raleigh Museum. My sisters and I went to be a part of that and to sing. We do 3-part harmony, a cappella. And so we're on a video that the women's movement, liberation movement, they're making a video. We sang for them in '97. They recorded us. Now they're using that music as background. We did background for a local movie at one time, and we just like to do it. Now I forgot what your question was.
It was just asking if you still performed at the schools.
At the schools and at festivals and fairs and churches and colleges. I just did the commencement address for Santa Fe College in December.
Really cool.
Yeah, and when we, at one point in time, there's one piece that I do that's about going to college that I probably had done for every college and university professor in Florida, because as Dr. Tyree, who was our president, as he met with different folk, he wanted me to come over and do this piece. And it's in African American folk language, but it's so encouraging. And the author is unknown, but it says, I've been sending you to college now for 6 or 7 years. Since the morning that you left me, I've been shedding bitter tears. But I thought of that old saying, sunshine comes behind the stone. So my young man, when you finish, you just bring that college home. And it goes right on till it gets, but I love it.
Do you want to perform it for me?
Well, you want to finish that? Okay.
Yes, I really like that.
I've been shivering in the I've been shivering by the wash tub, and I've been sweating in the fields. Many times I had to borrow, and I almost had to steal. But I held on to my patience, beat them soap suds into foam, All the time my heart was saying, he's going to bring that college home. I got food enough for winter, plenty clothes to keep me warm, so you trot on off to college. Then next June you bring it home. Don't you mind these folks here talking. They ain't half as good as you, and they's bound to laugh at good folks because that's all they knows how to do. So next spring, when the dogwoods blossom and the bees begin to swarm, I'll be waiting for to see you when you bring that college home. I don't mean bring home the buildings or to wreck them good folks' place. Bring home Christian education and that high-toned college grace. You just grab them festers' habits, hold them tight through wind and storm. Then when you get your diploma, take them all, bring them home. Show the folks here that you got them by the speeches that you make, by the specs that you be wearing, and the way your coattails shake. But don't get above the people. Settle down and don't you roam. Be a light in your own village. Be a college here at home. That's it. And the authors are known.
Yeah.
But the message is.
Where did you find the poem?
I found it when a young man presented it at a portrait contest that my church participated in. And this was back in '80s. And he did it. He did a marvelous job. And I said, please let me have a copy of that, please. And I started to do it, and I have done it ever since. Now, the fallacy involved here on the other end is that somebody has claimed it as something they wrote, and they didn't know that because the writers are known. Even I think it's even on Amazon, and it's incorrect in the way it's printed. So, I feel so. One girl put my piece on that she thought was what I said, and it was wrong. And I feel so that we need to be so true to history. I am a history, tell it like it is person. So I don't like to filter it, and I don't like to change it, and I don't like to make it, because whatever you do to it is what's going to be passed on. And you don't want to pass on the incorrect information. So I try to make sure I give it. And if I don't know it all, I want to make sure you know that this is my version and there may be another one.
Yeah, no, that's all. I think that's super important too. You definitely shouldn't be taking and reworking something that was beautiful on its own.
That's right. Right.
In what ways were they changing it?
Well, the language, it's African American folk language. Well, some haven't done it proper. They just don't know how to write the folk language and how to say it, and they've left out parts. And some have used standard English, which is another whole story. You don't have all day.
I have all day.
But I'm concerned that we lose the essence of what I grew up with in terms of the beauty of carrying on our heritage through music, through prose and poetry. One of the things I Google and I hear a song that we sang in African American folk language that's all standard English now, and they'll never know that the writer wrote that. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho and the walls, D-E, the walls come a time. And they'll make it all D-E. See, the folk language in some parts was done in such a way to accommodate the language from 6 countries from the continent of Africa, and the language English, 7 languages that the people who were being stolen from Africa and brought to America had to find a way to talk to the plantation owners. Now listen, they all had their own language and their standard English. So what they did, and I don't do all of this, but I like to do a part of it, because my friend did her dissertation, and it's on file here, because he graduated here at Jerry Scott. What she found out was that they all used D-E, the D sound, for TH sound, because TH didn't exist in any of those languages. So dat, D's, and dim is folk language. TH on the end of the word was dropped off, and the F we use, mouth, and both. So when I do all of that before I do poems or stories in folk language, because I want people to really get the history behind it. And so wherever you hear or see them, they'll say, oh, that's what she said. And I don't give it as the essence of all of the translations, but I do know that for the research that these researchers had in place, this is what they found out. And so I use it.
I've never thought of it like that before. I'm not really into linguistics, but that makes a lot of sense because they did have to adapt and find a way to communicate.
That's right. That's right. And you're going to hear it in all the movies and all everything. You're going to hear it because those are the words that they could put together and the way they use it. And then they passed them down 400 years. We're coming up on 400 years.
Wow.
And so they pass it down generation to generation to generation.
Orally.
Orally.
Spoken. Just like this.
Yes.
That's why oral history is so important.
It is. And I love Paul Ortiz for what he's doing and capturing a lot of it.
So I'm just very touched by your whole dedication to just caring for people, both culturally in terms of your performances and your singing and your storytelling, but also like your healthcare. I'm trying to like figure out je ne sais quoi, like I can't figure it out. But I actually want to touch back and see, when did you and your sisters start singing in
together?
A group and start like performing for people?
Well, when my older sister Effie and I were, I'm 4 years older than Sarah. F was a year older than I was. So F and I were both in school together. So we were in the chorus together in elementary and high school. Sarah came along 5 years later. And actually, Sarah didn't get in the chorus. The teacher sent for her. She said, "Isn't your last name Washington?" She said, "You need to be in here." And it turns out that Sarah has perfect pitch and was the best alto in the whole world. The music teacher would send her, she said, "Sarah, go sit with the basses and get them back go sit with the tenors." And she could do it all. So that's why we never use instruments. But since I'm 10 years older, I'm 14 years older than Kade. Sarah's 10 years older than Kade. We didn't have the third voice until Kade was born and became old enough. So we really didn't start this until probably she was 10 or 11. But when she was in kindergarten, she did her first solo on the stage at Williams Elementary. I can just see her now. She had a little yellow dress. It had a plaid top. She had I tell her this all the time. She had a big plaid up top, and she's standing up with her hands behind her back, singing her song. She has the most gorgeous voice. So she does weddings and all of those kind of things. I tell them I'm really not a voice. I carry the melody. Because they don't trust me with anything else. Because when we're doing the melody, they will take a piece, another note, and go up and down and all that. I stay with the melody. Because if I ever get off of it, I may never get back. But I admire them for that. Yeah,
no, but your part is very important too.
That's what they say.
I play violin. So,
okay.
But I usually don't play first violin. So first violin is the melody, and second violin tends to be the harmony, the supporting. And so we take the themes of the first violin and we move with it, but it's not on our own.
Right.
I think it's incredible what improv and just being able to come up with harmonies and
they do that.
All sorts of
they
things.
do that.
Yeah.
They do that.
Wow. So that started just because, like, through chorus?
Actually through church.
Through church?
Yeah, all of us sing at church.
Okay, which church?
So Mount Olive, same church,
So
Mount
same
Olive,
church.
AME. Okay. And we started being on programs, and then our choir director would have us going different places. And we started to travel around, and when people heard about the Washington Sisters, that's what we do.
Has a nice ring to it.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sure your parents were very proud of all of you.
Oh, my dad was in seventh heaven. Oh, he said his girls, he had 5 daughters. Can you imagine? He was the only man in the house. But he was a terrific dad. In fact, we all say we were his favorite daughter. Now, that takes a lot of ingenuity to do that. The difference of it all is that I really was his favorite daughter. The others just thought they were. But he was a great daddy.
What did your parents do for a living growing up?
My dad was a mechanic, and way back before the cars were so automated as they are now, he could, in his sleep, take apart any car and put it back together. In fact, I can remember we lived in Trenton, or we lived here, and late at night, somebody's car has stalled wherever. They'd come and get my dad. He'd get up out of bed and go get their car started. And he did that for all the time, and he worked as a mechanic from one Brook and Motors company was downtown where the old voter registration office was. I remember him working there for a number of years. Then he worked at Coppers at night after he'd worked there. But it was hard. It was hard. Then my mom was a chef. She cooked at the College Inn, which was on University Avenue, going west from the swamp. That whole set of buildings there, the whole businesses, right in the middle of that was something called the College Inn.
So it's near where, like St. Augustine, like the church and
No, it's still this side, between the church and the swamp, that whole group of buildings.
Yes. In
fact, the College Inn was one of the first places that was boycotted by the students with Dr. Chalmers, Dr. David Chalmers. His students were among them. And at the time, now my mother's in the kitchen cooking, but she told us we couldn't come. You know, she did those kind of things. But I was a civil rights worker, so I was involved in a lot. But the thing of it is that my mom worked there for all those years, and at the time she didn't have transportation. So she would walk. I don't know if you know where the Cotton Club is, Depot Park.
Yes, I know where Depot Park
is. Well, it's 4 or 5 streets beyond that.
It's all the way on Main.
Yeah, yeah. So my mom would still walk to 8th Street from there. But she'd walk all the way from the College Inn on University Avenue to home at night, because sometimes the bus didn't run. And my dad was either working at Coppers or he was going to school at night on the GI Bill, it was called. He could go, because he didn't have his high school diploma, and he was wanting to work on that. The problem was there was no place in Gainesville that would accept Black veterans in schools. So
crazy.
He had to, we got his wash tub ready with those tin tubs and his dinner, and he'd come home and eat and bathe and get dressed and get his book and sit on the corner 2 blocks away and wait for his friend who was also doing the same thing. And they'd drive to Putnam County to go to school at night. Isn't that something?
That is something. What school did they go to in Putnam?
I don't even know the school. No, but there was a school there that had a night class that would take them in.
What was he studying to
Just to get his high school diploma.
Just his high school diploma. Wow. So he served in the military.
Yes, World War II.
World War II.
He was at Iwo Jima in Nagasaki, he used to talk about. Yeah. I remember the dishes he used to send to us from over there. So, yeah, he was proud of that.
Before you guys were born then?
No, I was born in 38.
Wait, you were...
I was very born.
He better be from high school.
Yeah, I was born in 30. My sister was born in 37. I was born in 38. Now, Sarah was born right after the war. She was born in 43.
Okay.
And then the others.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
It's okay.
So... What was that like for your family, for him to be...
Well, we missed him a lot. And my dad was an older man that went into the Army because he was in his 30s. And when he was older and I was in charge of his health care, I'd take him to his visits to the doctor. My sister helped too, but I would go a lot because I knew what they would talk about. And he was a storyteller. I think that's where I got it from. He loved to tell stories. At church, he had the young people sitting around there just waiting for Mr. Levi to tell stories. But I just tell you one of his, and I'm going to let you go. But he said, one day he told me, he said, you know, when the soldiers were called up to serve, they called a man that couldn't see, was blind, and a man that had one arm. And I said, Daddy, how did they serve? What were they going to do with those men? That was terrible. He said, no, baby. All the soldiers had to have water. So one man could pump the water, and the other one could tell him when the bucket was full. And it wasn't true. He was just telling. And I was all into it.
You're like, Dad.
Yes. Oh, my God, Daddy. He had a lot of those.
He was messing with you. So he would tell funny stories like that?
Yes.
Like always try to get you?
Yes, always. Yes.
So that he would tell stories for everyone in the church then?
Well, the young people, he would gather around him. He actually joined church as an older man. He didn't. My mom and I took us to church all the time. Now we walked across the street to church in my later life, but later my dad had joined and he loved it, and the children loved him. And some of the kids still talk about. They're adults now, but they talk about that.
Okay, so wow. So we covered church and your parents. What about your grandparents on either side? Do you know much about them?
Yeah, I didn't know anything, still don't, about my dad's parents. He was the 13th child, and all of his other siblings were older and gone, I guess. Well, we met, and Aunt Flossie was the only one we knew. And there may have been some other people when I was younger, but I don't remember them. My mother's parents were from Augusta, Georgia. And when my mother moved here in the 30s, I guess my grandmother and those moved from Georgia here maybe in the 50s or 60s. And they lived in Hawthorne, and they passed away from there.
Okay. So your mom grew up in Florida, but
well, she was a young adult when she came, because she really came looking for work, so she could earn money and send it back to her family, because it's such a big family. So
do you know what she worked as when she first got here?
She worked as a maid in Trenton.
In Trenton.
That's where she met my dad.
Yes. Okay. And then they moved here. Okay. I'm just trying to connect the dots, you know, because I kind of skipped ahead. I got a little eager at the beginning.
That's okay.
So we covered when you were younger. How about today? So you already mentioned a lot of your activism and your community organizations. What about any sort of mutual aid organizations, like between Black people in the community, such like you mentioned, the Farmers Aid Society? Do you want to touch on any of those?
Well, the Farmers Aid Society is an African American group of farmers who, back in the times when it was segregated and very hard for them, banking, getting loans and all that was very hard. And I'm learning this from them because I wasn't involved. These were farmers. What they did was to band together into a society that they called the Farmers Aid Board or Farmers Aid Society. And they had rules and regulations that they followed in terms of meeting the needs of the members, financial needs, or checking on them when they're sick. And if you were in the hospital, you received X number of dollars. If you were out this long, you received, and they would follow that. So they paid regular dues out of the money they made and saved that in order to help the families in need at the time. And I'm sure they furnished physical labor as well if somebody needed it, but they certainly was there to meet that need. And that was good. And so, I belong to a lot of organizations that are helping, like the NAACP. I also chair the health committee for them, and they are involved in the city. And I work with Dr. Tucker on the things that she does. But I speak at a lot of forums and workshops, and I like to talk about health issues. And my master's degree in education was my first master's, and that was to teach. Well, the National League for Nurses decided if you were teaching nursing, you needed a master's degree in nursing. So I traveled back and forth working full-time to University of South Florida to get my master's in nursing, and I got that in mental health, psych mental health. So I've done some workshops and things on that.
So many different, all the different disciplines essentially in nursing. So when did you go back to school and get your master's?
The first master's.
The first master's, sorry.
Yeah, let's see. I graduated in 72. So I think at the end of the 70s, probably early 80s, I got my master's in education.
Okay.
And then it was 93, I think, I got my MSN, Master's in Nursing.
Okay, okay, cool. So with the NAACP, Were you involved with the NAACP during the 60s? Because you said you were also
I
active.
wasn't as involved with them, but I was a member of GWIR, Gainesville Women for Equal Rights.
Yes.
And we did a lot of walking and writing and going and boycotting and all of those things. So that was my involvement there.
I know you did serve on a panel that did talk about queer, but do you maybe want to talk about any very specific events or?
Yeah, well, there were so many. I worked with the others on the healthcare committee. Actually, I chaired the healthcare committee, and there were 4 of us, as I remember: Mabel Dorsey, Mary Webb, Alice Howard, and there was another girl. Her name escapes me. So there were two black women and 2 white women. But I just named more than that. So maybe Mary wasn't on there. I don't want to give you, but anyway, the committee was charged with trying to integrate doctors' offices and hospitals. And that's what we took on. So a lot of this is not chronicled anywhere, but we decided that we would challenge the doctor's offices first. Now, Mabel was pregnant with Rodney, who's some big professor in some school now in music, but and she's passed on. Mabel was pregnant with Rodney, and she was going to Dr. Dale, I believe it was. So she decided that she would integrate that office. My doctor was on 4th Avenue, and I decided I would integrate his office, because here's the scene. At that time, there was a cubby hole, a tiny little room for African Americans. You go down the walkway to the back of the building, enter the room, and the room is this little cubby hole. If you put 2 chairs together, there's barely walking room between them. That was the waiting room. And then on the wall, there's this window to look through to announce your presence there. And then at the time, the nurse would come and get you and take you out. Well, that's all we knew. So we decided we weren't going in that room anymore. Because it was our turn to integrate. And if anybody was going to do it, we were. So Mabel went in the front door of her gynecologist's office, or obstetrician's office, and I went in the front door for my doctor, and was amazed at how beautiful it was and all of that. But my doctor never sent me out, and they just accepted. They weren't very cordial. But that wasn't why I was there. So, and I've been in a lot of places they weren't cordial to me, but that has not been my problem. So from there, we then instructed others that when you go, don't go in that back room. Just choose the front room. And if this doctor won't let you in the front room, choose another doctor. And that's how we did that. And then at Lotte General, our strategy there was to confront them because they received federal funds. So when we presented that to the administrator, he didn't integrate right away, but we did let him know that the Hill-Burton funds only were supposed to go to places that did not discriminate either in their staff or patient care in any way. And they didn't listen to us that day, but Charles Chestnut belonged to a group that, I think the Equal Rights they were called or whatever, but there was a whole group of dedicated people seriously working on integration, and they got lawyers out of Jacksonville to take the case on with the board of directors with the hospital. And I don't remember when we had our talk with them, but I do know in '58 my son Delano was born in the segregated hospital, and in '62 Craig was born in the integrated hospital. So somewhere in between there it occurred.
Is when they finally pressured them with the federal.
Yeah, the lawyer.
Yes, the lawyers
got a little
like,
hot
okay,
there. Yeah, so
better step up your game.
That's
essentially.
right. That's right.
Yeah, anytime you threaten from above,
they didn't want to lose the money.
They don't want to lose money.
Which is why the schools integrated the high schools anyway too, because they didn't want to lose the money.
Yes.
That's it.
Exactly, but of course they integrated in the wrong way. So, oh gosh, there's so many things we could keep talking about. I wanted to know if you, specifically in healthcare, do you have any, you already mentioned a few moments like with Dr. Banks buying the incubator for the babies and things like that. Were there any other moments that really had an impact on you, like with patients or maybe with other workers?
Yeah. I love babies. So we had the very sickest babies. You know, they came with all sorts of illness. My thing was to just try to make an impact on them. So babies born with a cleft lip and palate, you know what that is? I worked with a group of nurses and nursing assistants who were trying to find the best way to feed them. And what we learned was how to situate the red nipple, we called it, with a larger opening in such a way that the baby could actually suck on that little bit of palate they had there. And so that became one of the things that I did a lot, along with the other nurses on the floor. But then my niece was born with a cleft palate, and the doctor didn't recognize it and was trying to get her breast fed, and she couldn't, so she's crying. My sister called, and they were in Tallahassee. I said, I'll be right there. So I took off there and fed her baby, and the baby slept, and she was just so tired. She was so shocked. So now this young lady, who's a lawyer now, she says, well, Aunt Vivian, I just credit you with my life. But that was one of the things that I taught a lot. But there was a baby. Meningomyelocele is what the spina bifida is the worst spina bifida. Because really spina bifida, you shouldn't be able to see. It's an imperfection that's x-rayed. But the meningomyelocele is a little impact on the back. Because it has fluid and nerve endings and that should have gone to the rest of the lower extremities. Well, this young lady was born with that, and I don't think she would mind because we talk about this all the time if I mention her. Yeah. Well, anyway, we won't. That'll be good. I took care of her when she was an hour old. She came over from Elijah General, and her dad was standing at the window watching me give her a bath and get her ready. She's just the cutest little thing. Well, she went to surgery, and they did that, and over time, she developed other things like hydrocephalus, so she's in and out of the hospital. When she became old enough, she insisted that I have her, no matter what room I was taking care of, I had to get, she's here, where is Vivian? Well, we talk all the time, we send cards on birthday, and we've been in communication all the time. So last time we talked, I called her name. I said, tell me how old you are. She said, well, I'm 53. I was just shocked. I thought, all this time we've been friends. But things like that. But I also have been impressed with the fact that a lot of lives are saved at Shands that couldn't have been saved anywhere else, I don't think. I saw a lot of different things and worked with a lot of very wonderful people. And the head nurse that I talked with on Facebook was talking about how great I was. I told her, no, you were the great. You were the great. I worked with you. But we worked together, and we did a lot of things like that. So I know one little guy when I was a clinical nurse, he was a hematology patient, and he had a situation where it was just his dad taking care of him. He lost his mom, and he had to be in and out because of hematology. And they had a hard time getting here, so sometimes they'd miss appointments because they live in Jacksonville. And the dad had to ride the bus or miss the bus, not have money. So he was going through a trying period where he had to be there almost every day. So I took him home to live with us because he was in middle age between my two boys, and they loved it. So until he finished that therapy, he stayed with us.
So kind of you to do that.
Well, I loved him. He was kind to take care of.
And then your own kids.
Yes, I have two great kids.
You have two great kids. What are their names and how old are they?
Delano Filer Jr. My husband was Delano Filer Sr. He was named for the President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And then my son, who's now 60 and is very ill. That's why I'm in there. But he was a voice major, got his bachelor's degree in voice from Bethune-Cookman University. He taught for a while, and then he worked as a social worker with Elder Options. My son Craig went, Craig Filer Sr. now, because he's named his son Craig Filer. He was a Florida A&M University graduate. His degree from there was in psych, but then his master's degree was in industrial psychology. I didn't know anything about industrial psychology, but he loves it. Field for sure. It's a different field. But the minute he graduated, he had a job, because that was a new field and everybody was looking for it. So on his first interview, they wanted to hire him, and he called and said, well, Mom, you think I should take the job? It's my first interview. I said, well, what are they paying you? And he told me, I said, call them right now. Tell them you'll be right in. So now he's been there 30 years, had his 30-year anniversary there.
That's great.
Yeah, so
okay, so Delano was a vocalist.
Yeah.
And Craig
bass baritone. And Craig sings, but Craig sings. All of us sing at a level. And at Christmas and Thanksgiving, all the times we're together, it's just a big blast, 3 or 4 part harmony. My nephews have their own quartet. They travel all over the state singing. And so we were out at a party one time at a restaurant, and they sent over the waiters to sing Happy Birthday. And when they left, we put our own cake out and we sang Happy Birthday in 3 and 4 part harmony. And they came back and they said, why did you let us do that?
Which let's embarrass ourselves in front of you.
But you know, we love all singing. Everybody can do their part. So.
Wow, so you have obviously you have very good genetics for singing and music.
Like from my dad, I think.
So did you raise your children in the church as well?
Oh,
and
yeah.
they also sang in the church?
Oh, well, yeah, and Craig sings in the church choir now. Delano wasn't as active, but they all have had their time.
Okay.
And Sarah sings in her choir, and we're at different churches now. And Kay sings in her choir, and then we get together.
Yeah. Do all your sisters still live in Gainesville or in surrounding areas?
My oldest sister lived here, but she passed away 2 years ago. 2 years ago, March, almost on her birthday. Her birthday was the 30th. And my baby sister is in Mount Vernon, New York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's a Lone Ranger. But she comes home. Yeah, she comes home. Her husband's a minister, and he was moved there and with the Church of Christ. So that's where she is. So they raised their girls, started in Tallahassee, then raised them up there. So one of them is a speech pathologist, and she's married and moved back down to Winter Park. And the older one is a lawyer, and she's still there in New York.
Okay. Okay, so that must be nice to have a lot of your family still here.
Yeah.
And then,
oh, it is. Yeah. And my mom, who everybody called Big Mama, since she was a chef, the food was off the chain. So all big holidays were at her house. And she knew which each grandchild, she loved grandchildren because she had 5 daughters, and the 3 of us that were married first, between us had 9 boys before a girl was born.
Wow.
She was sailing. She loved it, and they all talk about Big Mama and what she cooked. She knew my son like this or whatever, and she'd call them up, and she had that for them. But she really was outstanding. The church knew she was outstanding in that as well. So a lot of food.
What kind of food would she cook?
Soul food, basically. And she had a big pot that she made yellow rice in, and different from any yellow rice we'd ever had. And she never sent it to the church, though, until they were ready to serve it. She was not having them burn it.
Nice and fresh.
Yeah, she did not want them to reheat it and burn it. So she'd say, well, when you're ready to serve it, send somebody over here.
You can get it from me.
Yeah. So now everybody said, do you have Big Mama's recipe? And I said, oh, no, I don't have that. I have some, but I don't have that one.
It was a secret.
Yeah.
The secret ingredient for the yellow rice. So in the community itself, how have you seen it change positively from the time that, like, pre-integration, segregation to now? Like any sort of...
Well, see, I take a different view on that. We don't. I say we don't have integration. Okay. We have some desegregation in some places. Yes. True integration, it brings on equality, and we have not achieved that yet. My niece that I told you that's teaching, the speech pathologist, just 3 days ago, she had a group of kids together, and she instructed a young man to go sit next to another young man. He's Native, Indian Native American. And he told her that his parents told him not to sit next to niggers. So see, I say, we have a long way to go. Now, I'm very positive about the things that are being done, and I think they're being done on both sides. I'm involved with a lot of hard-working, well-meaning people who are working to try to make this happen. And this is from all over, and I'm really proud of that. But there's a lot of work that's undone that we did back, because I marched in the civil rights movement. I did all these things, and now it feels like, oh my goodness, are we going backwards? But what we're doing is uncovering what was smoldering under there all the time.
Yes.
Just didn't surface. So my thing, and I'm pretty bold, I try to say what I mean, and I try to say the same thing all the time. And what I say is that we've got to have the real talk. The responsibility has got to be shared. It can't just be placed on us. We've got to prove that we're good Americans. We've got to prove our history. We've got to prove that we accept. We're tired of doing that. We want it to be a mutual society. So I said to a group, I want to know, when I walk past Buchholz High School and Gainesville High School, to get to my segregated school in the rain on the other side of town, you were sitting there in your school, perhaps looking at me. I want to know what you were thinking. You were the other side. If you're a student, you weren't responsible for that, but you must have had a thought about it. And as an adult, what did you do about it? Did you see an inequity in there? Did you take time to find out enough about it to know that there was an inequity? If you are saying that I know the travails of African Americans and what they've suffered and what they've done, and you've never read a book written by an African American, you really don't know. Because as much as I think others try to write our story, they're not our story. They'll do the best they can, but they're not our story. So so James Baldwin and all of those, you have to read them to know what's going on. Zora Neale Hurston, we just celebrated.
Love her.
I know.
She's incredible.
Very incredible. She was really a woman of her time, before her time.
She really, truly, so underappreciated.
Absolutely.
I completely agree with, I was just, wow, kind of in awe of what you just said, but it's so true. You can't just take someone's story, and make it your own, write it in the way that you felt it happened.
That's right. And you will perceive things, because you're a human. And if you don't know, if I see somebody sitting on the side of the road, this African American, and without something, and you see somebody, you're going to want to help them, as I want to help them. But what I see is my uncle and my granddaddy and my cousin. And what I'm remembering is situations that put them there. So I can tell the story from a different place than you, even though you're willing and you want to do that. So that's the depth that needs to be there.
Oh, definitely. Okay, wow, I just lost my train of thought a little bit. But do you have any, other than obviously like Zora Neale Hurston, are there any other Black women or Black men that really were, I don't know, not exactly role models, but just that you think have been, I don't know, outstanding members of just society?
Well, I look at Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, who started a whole college, and she nurtured in that way. And she had a lot of other women that worked, alongside of her, but go back further than that. My favorite shero is Sojourner Truth. Now, she was born Isabel Bumfrey, and she had a religious experience and changed her name. But she walked into that meeting in Ohio and had her say, because her name was Sojourner Truth. She walked in and her speech says, well, what's all this racket going on? Seems to me that between the white women of the North and the Negroes of the South, all are talking about their rights. The white man is going to be in a fix pretty soon. He says that women got to be lifted over ditches and helped over into carriage and given the finest places everywhere. Ain't nobody never helped me over no ditch. And ain't nobody never lifted me in no carriage. And ain't I a woman? And she goes on, and I do the whole speech sometimes, but you got to read it. It's just
Ain't I a Woman,
thrilling.
right?
Ain't I a Woman?
Yes.
And it has been redacted or rewritten and revised so many times. It's even in standard English in some places.
Yeah, I've seen it written in standard English.
And they said that she was actually born up north. And to Dutch, she was into a Dutch family. I guess that's who owned her. So she actually may not have spoken African American folk language, but whoever rewrote the speech did it in such a way. So there's several versions, and some have said that she had 13 children. Some say she had 5 children. So it really does change along the way. The fact that they were all sold off into slavery is what the important piece is.
So it was harder to keep track of maybe how many kids she actually had.
Absolutely.
So which version do you typically tell?
I do the 13. She had 13. I done born 13 children in the world and had them almost all sold off into slavery. And when I cried out with the mother's grief, ain't nobody heard me but my Jesus. And ain't I a woman? So I take the 13. She's something.
How long is it? Do you want to recite the whole thing?
Oh, do you want to? You're gonna have
I love listening to you.
Okay, well,
we have time and time.
Passed to me that between the white women of the North and the Negroes of the South, all talking about their rights, the white man's gonna be in the fix pretty soon. And that man over there, he says that women got to be lifted over ditches and helped into carriages and given the finest places everywhere. Ain't nobody never helped me into no carriage. And ain't nobody never lifted me over no ditch. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. I done plowed and planted and lifted in the barns, and ain't no man can have me. I can work as much and eat as much as any man when I could get it. And ain't I a woman? I done born 13 children in the world and had them almost all sold off into slavery. And when I cried out with a mother's grief, ain't nobody heard me but my Jesus. And ain't I a woman? What's that thing in the head? Intellect. That's it, honey. If my cup won't hold but a pint, and yourn would hold a quart, wouldn't you be mighty mean not to let me have my little half measure full? That man over there in the black suit, he said, women ain't got no rights because Christ wasn't no woman. Women ain't got no rights. I forget that part. And I said, where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Ain't no man had nothing to do with it. And if one woman that God created could turn the world upside down all by herself, pairs to me that all these here in this room ought to be able to set it right side up again. And now, that's all I got to say. So, certain truth ain't got nothing else to say. And I kind of ad-libbed it, some of it.
No, that's okay.
But the idea is that she's trying to get them the reason with women can do it. And look at what we're doing now. Oh, if Sojourner could see it now.
She was essentially the first feminist, if you just put feminism in the definition.
That's right. She said we could do it.
Wow. She's incredible.
Yeah.
You're incredible to be able to remember all that. Wow. So do you have any final thoughts or reflections that you want to add that we didn't get to touch on throughout the whole thing? I know we kind of jumped around.
Yeah. Well, the fact that we're going to try to capture local African American history through the Cotton Club Museum and Cultural Center, Inc. We've been working on it for years. We had ribbon cutting in November on Veterans Day. Actually had some veterans there who spoke. It was a big affair. It was beautiful. Then we had the big gala on February 2nd. But our goal is to bring in African American history. It's teachable, that people can come to learn. We want to have artists to come that will introduce their genre of whatever art and then bring the kids in from the schools to see it. We will have traveling exhibits, some of which are coming along, and our real emphasis will be on music, but we'll cover it all. And right now, a big part of what we want to get in is local history of people who have contributed in Gainesville, who weren't at the top of the ladder in terms of position, but prided along, did their everyday thing, and were the fabric of the community. So what I've done is taken the triad community. I will move all over town, but this is the way I'm starting. Porter's, Spring Hill, and Sugar Hill. And I've asked each of these communities to pick 2 families that we're calling the pioneer families. And we'll gather the data on them, and I'll probably get with you guys to record it.
Yes.
And we want to get, artifacts and pictures and whatever they can gather to make it a museum display. And then I'll display that. I have a big reception to introduce it and keep it for 6 months. Yes. And then go take another set. And for each one that's there, ask them to leave. We'll decide what we want to leave in a permanent way and get a perpetual wall going that does that. So when the children come along, they feel valued because, yes, my mother played the piano, but she played the piano for 40 years. Yes, my mother did this for the community, but she did that all of her life. And she was successful at it. And my daddy was a carpenter. My daddy laid bricks. We're losing all of that because there are no apprentices now with all of these people because they're contracted out. And they're losing the vocational part of it. And there's money in the vocational part. There are careers there. And they're very upstanding places to be. So those are things I want to highlight in the museum.
And just have people be aware of local histories.
That's
for
right.
sure, because I don't know about you, but definitely me growing up, the only thing I knew about Florida history was Ponce de Leon.
Yeah, that's what they taught,
St. Augustine.
which is really, right.
And they're like, okay, Christopher Columbus came and the conquistadors, and they just took the land, and that's it.
Yeah,
but they didn't even mention the Native Americans that they took
belonged
it from.
to some. That's right, and what they did to them.
Yeah.
What they did to them. So.
And then that was way before, you know.
Yeah, and another thing we do, we celebrate the Emancipation Proclamation. We have what we call Juneteenth Festival on the 19th of June. And this year we also are celebrating the emancipation of Florida because there were 2 states that were lagging with letting their citizens know. The 19th of June for Galveston, Texas was read, but on the 20th of May, in Tallahassee, the Emancipation Proclamation was read 2.5 years later, 1865. So we will have displays commemorating that because we want the history to be known. We're not asking anybody to go back and fix it because you don't fix history. You just record it, learn from it, so you don't repeat it if it was negative. Yes. And that's our goal.
Yeah, we're not here to rewrite it.
No.
We're just here
to not hold blame. I tell people, go ahead and say it. We're not holding you responsible for it, but if you don't ever acknowledge it and sweep it out, it's like, I hope this is, if you can cut it out. It's like right now when we say, what is this slang about America? Make America great again. I'm thinking, which part of this greatness should I look for? The slavery part or the segregation part? What is it I'm going back to? I had that conversation just a few days ago at the symposium. Yeah. I had this big debate that said, oh, Vivian's getting that guy. Because he came in there with that hat on. I said, what do you do with that hat on? Then I had to let him know that that's really not in a place we need to go back to. So, but anyway, I threw that in.
It's like, make it great to what?
Yeah, to what?
What was great?
To what, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, they do say, man, I can't remember. It's like history belongs to those who write it.
Yeah.
So it's always been white men.
That's right.
The dominant...
It's his story, not ours. The great white father's story is not ours.
Story.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Okay. So I don't have anything else I would like to ask you.
Great.
But this was incredible.
Thank you.
I'm just going to put forth. Thank you so much for coming up and driving, I don't know how long, an hour, 2 hours?
No, it's just 60 miles. It's supposed to be an hour and 27 minutes.
Okay,
I usually shave a few minutes off. But
thank you so much for traveling here this morning.
Well, thank you.
So incredible to meet you. You have done so much for not only Gainesville, but just, I see a lot of potential for the Cotton Club Museum, especially if it's going to be traveling around Florida because kids need to know.
Yes.
These young people need to know. I mean, I'm a young person, but I think more people my age need to be aware of things that have happened in Florida, and then maybe even national history as well.
And I find that they do want to know. The resources aren't there.
Yes.
in a way that they want to receive them. Because we have this technology group now, and they're not going to pick up a book usually and read it. They might listen to a book, but they're not actually going to pick one up. So how do we present this history to them, and how do we get them engaged enough to realize that they are here because of this history? That's important. So, okay. Thank you for asking me.
So thank you very much for coming out today, and that's the end of the interview for now.
Okay.
Okay.